All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. A lot to do today. Begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank all of our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nissan. Jerry and Abby Applebaum for dedicating the shiurim in memory of Basya Bas Chaim, David Ben Avraham, Doctors Paul and Linda Weinberg for dedicating the shiurim, the zchus of the aliyah for the neshama of Mordechai Yehoshua ben Peretz Moshe and Miriam, Paul and Kathy Pollack in the zchus of refuah sheileimah for Donna Baker-Matson, Teri Czinn, with gratitude to Hashem for their grandson Bunim Tzvi Hersch Naftali Tilson, with akaras hatov to his chaver Benjamin Wohl, and with wishes for a Chag Kasher V'Sameach to the entire shir, and Avraham Shaindy Kelman in the zchus of an aliyah for the neshama of Sara Braina bas Yehoshua Heschel. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in the chaver. So with that, let us begin. We have an ambitious goal today of the merit Hashem finishing the daf with a very, very, very special surprise in the daf, embedded in the daf for us. So today's daf is Lamites. Hopefully you did your homework. We are picking up on the second to last line of Lamed Ches Amud Beis 38b Abayi Amar. But remember again, we're still in the same topic. I just wanted to cover a little bit of ground. We're still in the same topic, namely trying to distinguish between the Reisha and the Seifa of the Mishnah. We had two cases in which a Shomeres Yavam went ahead and, we have two cases. One case is where she inherits property while waiting for Yibum. The second is where she dies while waiting for Yibum. And the Mishnah launches into a discussion regarding the laws of inheritance as they apply to this particular woman. So Abayi Amar, Reisha Dinaflo Kishi Shomeres Yavam. Abayi says the Reisha, the first case in the Mishnah, is where she inherited property when she is a Shomeres Yavam. She's waiting for Yibum. And what's the halacha? Seifa Dinaflo Kishi Tachtav the Baal. The Seifa is talking about where she already passed away, where after she had already performed Yibum. Top of Lamites, because Sara Braina and Abayi holds Yado ki Yada. Ultimately, again, her hand is, or I should say, his hand is like her hand, meaning that halacha lamaisa he acquires in the same way that she acquires. Amalei Rava says, well, 1 second. Well, that's not totally true, because halacha lamaisa, if you're telling me that the seifa is a case where they're already married, then everyone agrees that at the end of the day, the truth is, in certain ways, the husband has even greater rights than the wife. Rather, again, we're back to what we said before. Both cases are talking about where she acquired property while she was still a shomeres yavam. She was waiting for Yibum. Reisha de lo avad b'ma'amar. Okay, so I'll say, listen to this. The Reisha is a case where the Yavam did not yet perform Ma'amar. Seifa da'avid ba-Ma'amar. So therefore I will say, what the Gemara is making the suggestion, because Sama Rava, Ma'amar le Beis Shammai, Ose Vadai Arusa, V'safek Nisua. So ultimately, again, the Mishnah reflects the view of Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says that Ma'amar creates essentially a status of Vadai Erusin. But remember, again, we've seen this before already. Fundamental machlokes Beis Shammai Silal as to what Ma'amar accomplishes. Beis Shammai holds Ma'amar is really powerful and Ma'amar is really effective. That Ma'amar, in this formulation here, according to Beis Shammai, Ma'amar goes ahead and creates a situation of what he calls Vadai Erusin Safek Nisuin. Ultimately, what does that mean? Vadai Arusa Litchos Batzara. So Ma'amar creates Vadai Erusin in that after you go ahead and do Ma'amar, with the Yavam does Ma'amar, with the particular woman, he has pushed aside the co-wives. So at this point in time, again, halacha l'maisa, this is the designated wife, and the tsaros themselves, the co-wives, are now exempted from Yibum. The Safek Nisua, and ultimately creates Safek Nisuin, Lachlok B'nechasim. Ultimately, again, to allow him to potentially go ahead and divide up property. Again, in the event, let's say that this woman dies, to divide up property with her family. Incredible. Itmar Mishmei Rabbi Lazar. Itmar Mishmei Rabbi Lazar. Kavase Dirava. Veitmar Mishmei Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Chanina. Kavase Dabai. So now we have a fundamental machlokes Abai and Rava as to how to interpret the case of the Mishnah. So the Gemara says as follows: Umi Amar Rabbi Lazar Hachid. Rabbi Lazar actually say this. V'Hamar Rabbi Lazar Ma'amar LeBeis Shammai Eino Kona Ela Litchos Batzara Bilvad. Yet we learned that halacha l'maisa, ma'amar according to Beis Shammai is only effective to do what? To go ahead and essentially lidchos b'tzara. Lidchos b'tzara means that after the yavam does ma'amar with a particular wife, the other wives essentially are free. They're free to marry. They're free to go about their business. So the Gemara says, "Epoch, you're right. Switch around the shitos." The Yibai saying the other possibility is, "Liolam epoch." No, you don't have to turn around the shitos. Amr lechar belazar ki amri ana delo sagila beget ela dibay nami chalitza. So we'll say. So ultimately, Belazar will say like this, or in interpretation, Belazar will say like this: Ki amri ana. When do I say ultimately again? When did I state my position? Delo sagila beget, meaning that a get is not going to be enough to dissolve the marriage. Rather, what? Ela dibay nami chalitza. She's going to require chalitza as well. Lachlok benechasim delo kani mi amri. But at the end of the day, to go ahead and split up. I'm sorry. They'll say again, but ultimately, again, to go ahead and say that he does not acquire property, he has to divide a property. Did I ever state anything like that? To which the Gemara says, Papa, you could demasnisin kavase da'abaye, ba'afagav the kashya mesa. So Papa says, ultimately, the Mishnah seems to really align itself with Abaye, even though the case of where she passed away seems to pose a problem. Okay? Diktani, nechasim hanichnasim v'yotzim ima. Because remember again, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah spoke about property, nichnasim, that came into the marriage, or that go out with her. My nichnasim and my yotzim. What does it mean, property that comes in and property that goes out? Lav nichnasim l'shus harbal. V'yotzim ishus habal l'shus ha'av. It must be referring to property that comes into the domain of the husband, and that leaves the domain of the husband into the domain of the father. Va'af agav the kashya mesa, and even though again we have the question about the case where she passed away, adamifligi begufa ula'achar mesa liflagu bechaya leperos. Instead of going ahead and talking about the case where halacha lamaisa, instead of going ahead and slicing the case of where she passed away, so instead of going ahead and setting this up as a case where she passes away, and then the discussion is who divides up the property, go ahead and dissect or distinguish in the case ultimately where she's still alive, and don't make it a question about inheritance, but rather make it a question about usage. Sulomidi. The Gemara says it's a good point, but there's nothing more to discuss regarding this matter. So we'll say this concludes this sugya over here. Just to kind of highlight this a little bit. I'll think about the Rambam with me. Okay, so we'll say the Rambam paskins that halacha l'maisa. The point that I think is important to take from here is the status of a shomeres yavam, right? And the status of a shomeres yavam is that when a woman is waiting for yibum, the Rambam paskins like the opening line of this Mishnah, which is a shomeres yavam. Her yavam has absolutely no rights in her property. So this is incredibly important. So therefore, again, whatever she does with her property, she buys, she sells, she inherits. The Yavam has absolutely no rights in that. So in other words, let's say, for example, she sells off all of her property, then she gets married, or then she does Yibum. The Yavam has no rights to go back and extract any of that property. Now, remember, contrast that with a typical marriage, right? In a typical marriage, a wife, let's say, Rachel comes into marriage with 5 fields. Right, she's not married to Reuven. She decides, one day I'd like to have a little bit more cash on hand, so she sells off a field. What's the halacha in that case? Reuven could go back and extract the property from the purchasers. Why? Because since Reuven has peiros, Reuven has usage. Remember again, Rachel holds on to title of her property, but Reuven has usage. That usage allows him to avoid any sale that she makes. The point that the sugi is making over here is that a yavam does not have that power. And I will say this goes back to a same central theme, which is, although there is a zika, right? There's a zika. There is a quasi-marital bond that exists between the yavam and the yavama. It's a weak bond. It's a connection. Maybe what we'd call it is a connection and not necessarily a bond. So it's a connection in that, again, halacha lamaisa, there is a relationship there that if neither of them want to pursue it, has to be actively dissolved. But lamaisa does not give him active rights in anything else. Incredible. I will say, what about the case ultimately where she passes away, right? The seifa of the Mishnah, where halacha lamaisa she passes away. What do we do in that case? So there, the Rambam Paskins like Beis Hillel, that halacha lamaisa, all the property remains in its chazaka status. So whoever was muhzak, whoever had the property, ultimately, whoever has the chazak on the property, ultimately retains the property. Incredible. But so let's go weiter. Kan saharihi. So remember again, the Mishnah says something very interesting. The Mishnah said, once they do yibum, ultimately she is treated like his wife, right? Lashon of the Mishnah was, Kansa harihi ki ishto l'chol davar. Right? If they get married, she is like his wife in every matter. So we'll say, the Gemara says, Lamai hilchasa. So what does that mean? In other words, what is the Mishnah coming to add on? So this is very interesting. Rabbi Yossi Rechanina, Lomar shemegarsha beget, umachzira umagarsha beget. Very interesting. Rabbi Yossi, what does it teach me? That after the couple does yibum, after Shimon does yibum with Rachel, if they decide a year later, 10 years later, a month later, that you know what, this marriage is not working out, he has to divorce her with a get, with a regular document of divorce. Not only that, but halacha l'maisa, let's say they divorce, and then they decide, you know what, we'd like to reconcile, that halacha l'maisa, as long as she has not married anyone else in the interim, they are permitted to get back together. To which the Gemara says, Pshita, I don't understand why, what's the chiddush over here? They're just like any other marriage. I'll tell you why. V'adayin yebume harishon aleha b'chalitzein beget lo. Snevo says it's very simple. I might have thought that since this is a yibum relationship, maybe the yibum identity of the relationship devolves upon the marriage in its entirety. To the point that even if you want to dissolve this marriage, how do you dissolve yibum? With chalitza. With chalitza. Now I will say, now again, not only do you dissolve a yibum bond with chalitza before yibum was performed, but the havamina is v'lachalo leisha v'yibma. See, I will say, with the Gemara Darshan over the pasuk says he will take her as a wife v'yibma, and he'll do yibum. The Gemara Darshan, you might have thought that the yibum identity of this relationship devolves upon the marriage in its entirety, to the point that even if you want to dissolve this marriage, what? You have to dissolve it like yibum, i.e. with chalitza, kamashmala no. Kamashmala that halacha l'maisa, once they do yibum, this morphs into a normal marriage, or in every way. And therefore, if they want to dissolve it, they need to go ahead and do chalitza. So the Gemara says, machzira. Furthermore, again, after they divorce, if he wants to remarry her, he can remarry her. Pshita, sadai tamina mitzvah diramya rachman alei avra avda hashta teikom alei be'isra eshazach. Supposedly, this is very interesting. Why would you have thought otherwise? Listen to this. I might have thought like this. The Torah says there's an erva, right? I will say, who's the erva? The erva is my brother's wife, right? Eshazach. The Torah says that prohibition is lifted, right, in order to do yibum. But I might have thought that once they do yibum and then they decide to get divorced, then what? Perhaps the Isra Eshes Ach returns. Right? Perhaps it just comes back. Kamash Molono. Kamash Molono say that essentially, once yibum occurs, this is fascinating, once yibum occurs, the Isra Eshes Ach is totally dispensed with. There is no longer any Isra Eshes Ach, to the point that even if they marry, right, once they marry, even if they divorce, if they decide to remarry, ultimately that would be permitted. Incredible. So 1 second. Why don't we say that? That's actually a good svara. Right? Why don't we say that? That Allah so the Isra Eshesach is lifted to allow for yibum, but once they decide to divorce, the Isra Eshesach comes back and would preclude what? Them remarrying each other. To which the Gemara says, Amakra, v'lachalo li'isha, kevan shalakha, harihi ki ishto l'chol davar. Because the pasuk says, he will take her as a wife. And the Torah indicates to us that once yibum is performed, this relationship transforms into a normative marriage. Incredible. We'll say first wide line. Subasa. And we'll say now there is now. So essentially, the Mishnah says once yibum is performed, this becomes a totally normal marriage. There is one notable exception. What's the notable exception? Ksuva. ksuva, that halacha lemaisa, the ksuva of this woman is against who, or I should say, is leveraged against whose estate? Reuven's. Right? Remember again, this is the one major distinction. She has no ksuva claim upon her yavam, upon Shimon. Her ksuva claim goes against the property, or is levied against the property of Reuven. Now I will say, interestingly enough, remember, who inherits Reuven? Who inherits Reuven? Right? Shimon, the brother, right? The yavam. So interestingly enough, remember again, Shimon may end up carrying the responsibility, but Lamaisa, remember as we spoke about yesterday, we'll say, why does this matter? When you get married, what's encumbered to the ksuva? What's encumbered? Everything. Mamish everything. Real property, movable property, which again means that as a married man, if you want to sell anything, technically speaking, anything you sell is encumbered. Right, has some type of claim against it. Ksuva. The difference over here is that when Shimon does yibum, it is only Reuven's property that is encumbered to the ksuva, but Shimon's own property is unencumbered. Says Gemara, my taimo. Why is that? Both say this is fascinating. My taimo, isha hiknula min hashamayim. You know, both say, do you know why? Because ultimately, again, Hakadosh Baruch Hu provided this woman for this man. Both say, which is another way of saying what? Shimon did not really choose this relationship. Right? He didn't choose it. It was thrust upon him. Now there's a mitzvah for him to do yibum. He's doing the mitzvah. Look at Rashi, almost right across from Rashi. Min hashamayim v'lo shibed nechasav l'ksuvasa v'yachal l'machram b'chol eish yirtzeh. See, I say the idea of a ksuva being encumbered. Right? Why is it that when a man gets married, his property is encumbered to the ksuva? Why? Because he's willingly entering into this relationship. So part of what so what woman comes into a relationship, she brings with her property, she brings with her possessions, and although she retains title, her husband gets full usage. What does the husband bring financially to the table? A ksuva commitment, and ultimately, again, a lien against all of his property. But that assumes that both parties are coming in willingly to this relationship. In this case over here, the Yavam didn't actively choose to be part of this. Sure, he's choosing to do Yibum, but Lamaisa, contextually, he did not choose to be in this situation. Isha hiknalo min hashamayim. Ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought about this situation. So reflective of the fact that he did not choose this, there's no encumbrance against his property, rather it's against the deceased brother's estate. So the Gemara will say, now listen to this. What happens if Reuven died penniless? Reuven died penniless. So there is no estate of the first husband. Right? So what happens to Rachel's ksuva? Listen to this. Takinu la misheni. Ultimately, again, Chazal instituted and said, Shimon, you have to give her a ksuva. So what's an interesting case? In other words, normally what we'll say is when Reuven has property, so the ksuva will come from Reuven's property. But Allah if Reuven doesn't have any property, then the ksuva will have to come from Shimon's property. Why? See, I will say, there are a couple of reasons for the ksuva. Number one, ksuva gives a woman a sense of financial security, both during marriage as well as in the event of death or divorce. So there's a benefit for the woman. There's another benefit for the woman, that Chazal wanted to create an instrument that would make a man think twice before divorcing his wife. In other words, I will say, well, what do we consider about sometimes in the course of marriage? That if divorce becomes too easy, then what happens? As soon as someone gets upset, they can kind of pull that trigger. So what's the beauty of a ksuva? A ksuva causes you to pump the brakes a little bit. How so? Because if you're going to get divorced, that's fine, but understand that what? There's a lot of money you're going to have to pay. So because there's a lot of money you have to pay, it's kind of just a built. Now again, sometimes divorce is required, sometimes divorce is necessary, sometimes the money has to be paid. But what it does is, it just forces the husband to pump the brakes a little bit and to think about, again, am I making a rash decision because I'm upset? Or at the end of the day, is this truly the right course of action? So therefore I will say, either way, halacha ma'aseh, because of security of the woman, or in order to get the man to pump the brakes before any decision to divorce, halacha l'ma'aseh, if Reuven, the deceased husband, does not have any property, Shimon will have to go ahead and provide Rachel with a ksuva from his own property. So again, I will say this halacha l'maisa. So halacha l'maisa again. So first of all, number one, when they get married, the marriage transforms into a regular marriage. So therefore, to dissolve, you need a get. If when they get divorced, they want to reconcile and remarry, they can do so as long as she hasn't married anyone else in the interim. Her ksuva is against her deceased husband, her first husband's estate. But should there be no property in Ruvain's estate, the ksuva is against Shimon's estate. Beautiful. Both sides, Mishnah. Fascinating Mishnah. Mitzvah begadol yabim. They both say the mitzvah is upon the oldest brother to do yibum. Mitzvah is upon the oldest brother to do yibum. Lo ratza. We'll say what happens if the oldest brother. Rabbi say, by the way, when we say oldest brother means oldest brother in this circumstance, right? In other words, that let's say, by the way, how incredible is it that we're learning the sugya of Bechar, right? Antainis Bechorim. We'll say, how incredible is that? How absolutely incredible is that? So let's say, so again, I just want to point out over here, Gadol just means the oldest surviving brother. So, for example, if it's the Bechar who passed away, right? Let's say in this case, Reuven, right? The brother is the Bechar. So it means again, the oldest brother, the next oldest brother. So mitzvah begadol yabim. The mitzvah is upon the oldest brother to go ahead and do yibum. Lo ratza, if he doesn't want to do yibum, mahalchin al kol ha'achin. Ultimately, they go down the list. Go down the list for all the brothers. Lo ratzu. We'll say, what happens if they go down the list? Let's imagine for a moment, there's Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Four brothers. Reuven passes away. Okay, so we go to Shimon, right? We go to Shimon. We say, Shimon, no, what are you going to do? So Shimon doesn't want to do yibum. We go Levi, Yehuda. No one wants to do yibum. What's the halacha? So the Gemara says lo ratzu. Now, actually, I should take it back. I'm saying they don't want to do yibum. We'll see in the Gemara what lo ratzu actually means. So if no one wants to take action, chozrin eitzel gadol. We go back to the oldest brother. In this case, Shimon. We say to him, Alecha mitzvah, o chalotz, o yabem. So we'll say the buck stops essentially with the oldest brother. And if none of the other brothers want to do anything, we go back to the oldest brother. We say, listen, oldest brother, right? Buck stops with you. You got to take action. Either do chalitza or do yibum. In other words, you don't have to go ahead and do yibum if you don't want to do yibum. But halacha l'maisa, you have to do something. You have to do something. Tala bekatan ad sheyagdil abagad lashiyam medinas hayam. Well, let's say, listen to this. Let's say the brothers say, you know what? Our youngest brother, in this case Yehuda, he's a really good boy. He's not old enough right now to go ahead and do yibum, but wait for him a little bit. Wait for him a couple of years, and ultimately he's going to do yibum. So in this case, they said, let's wait for the younger brother. Or Shimon, who is now the oldest brother, is away on business. He's overseas. He'll be back in a little bit. Let's wait for him. So what do we say? Omrim lo alecha mitzvah, o chalotz, o yabem. We say to him, ultimately, we say to that older brother, what are we saying? We say to the older brother, or we say to whoever is there, the oldest brother who is present, we don't wait, right? At the end of the day, we're not waiting for the younger one to grow up. We're not waiting for anyone to go overseas, to come back from overseas. We don't delay the mitzvah. Rabbi say, I want to show you something amazing. Take a look at Rashi, the last short line of Rashi. Alecha mitzvah, shiafa pishachi choshem dinasem gadol mimcha. Even though Shimon is older than you, is overseas. Kevan da'ata gadol ha'achin shlefanenu. Since now you're the oldest brother who's here, alecha mitzvah, dishahuye mitzvah, lo mishahinan. Rabbi was saying, we do not go ahead and delay mitzvahs. Rabbi said, do you know where that principle comes from? Mitzvah habali yadecha al tachmitzena ushmartem es hamatzos al tikri matzos ela mitzvos. Rabbi say, absolutely incredible. Remember, we learned this concept. Torah says ushmartem es hamatzos. Ushmartem es hamatzos. You're supposed to go ahead and watch the matzos, that they don't go ahead don't go ahead and make sure to perform the mitzvos. And the Gemara says, when a mitzvah comes to your hand, al tachmitzena, don't allow it to become chametz. Don't allow, right? So the idea over here, the Gemara says, is you say to the brother who's here, we don't wait. Shahuye mitzvah, lo shirabosai. You can't allow your mitzvahs to become chametz. We'll say, isn't this incredible? We just learned about the Bechar, Tanis Bechorim, a reference to chametz. Don't allow things to become chametz. At Erev Pesach, absolutely incredible. And we're going to see that a little bit more in just a moment. We'll say, the idea being is that Allah Chalamaysa, we don't wait for any of the other brothers. Even if there's a younger brother who's going to do yibum, older brother, we don't wait. We go ahead and we force the oldest present brother to take decisive action. Says the Gemara. We'll say, listen to this case. Itmar bias katan v'chalitzas gadol. We'll say, what if there's a choice between the following? Bias katan v'chalitzas gadol. So we'll say, let's say in this case over here, the oldest brother, we'll call him Shimon, wants to do chalitza, but Yehuda is willing to do yibum. So which is preferable? Chalitza with the oldest brother or yibum with the youngest brother? Is there a preference? So, pligi Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, machlokes, chad amar bias katan adifa. One says yibum with the younger brother is preferable. The chad amar chalitzas gadol adifa. Both say, do you hear what the sheileimah is? There's a tension. What's the tension? On one hand, we say if there's a choice between yibum and chalitza, we assume that which one is preferable? Yibum. On the other hand, we just got finished saying in the Mishnah, mitzvah bigadol. Right? The mitzvah to take action in this case is upon the oldest brother. So what do you do if there's a clash? The oldest brother is willing to act, but he's only willing to do yibum. The oldest brother is willing to act, but he's only willing to do chalitza. The youngest brother is willing to act, he's willing to do yibum. So which is preferable in this case? So machlokes. Chadam Rabbias katan adifa, chadam chalitzas gadol adifa. One says yibum of the younger brother is better, and one says chalitza of the older brother. Man da'amar bias katan adifa. The one who says that ultimately, again, bias katan is better, the mitzvah yibum, because the mitzvah yibum is preferable. So better to have yibum with the youngest brother than chalitza with the oldest. Uman damer chalitzas gadol adifa, b'makom gadol bias katan lav klumhi. And we'll say the other opinion will say no, since the Mishnah says that the mitzvah is with the oldest brother, whatever the oldest brother is willing to do is better than whatever anyone else is going to do. So if the oldest brother is willing to do chalitza, we'll take it. So we'll say fundamental machlokes. So let's analyze. So the Gemara says, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Lo Ratza. Remember again, this Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if the oldest brother does not want to, Machzira Kol Achin, we go to the other brothers. So my love, Lo Ratza liyabim eliyachid. So what does it mean, Lo Ratza? The oldest brother didn't want to. What does it didn't want to? The Pashtos didn't want to means he doesn't want to do yibum. So we go to the other brothers and we see if anyone else is willing to do yibum. Vikatani mahachin eitzala achin, and we see that we go to the other brothers. Shmamina, what do you see from here? Shmamina bias katan adifa. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that yibum with a younger brother is preferable to chalitza with an older brother. To which the Gemara says, no, lo ratza lachlot v'lo liyabim. No. What the Mishnah actually means is we go to the older brother, and the older brother is unwilling to do anything, right? He's unwilling to do yibum or chalitz, just simply unwilling to act. Dikavasa, that's when we go to the other brothers. Dikavasa, Gabiach, and I will say this is the case of the Mishnah. You go to the brothers, and none of the brothers want to do anything. So the Gemara says, Dikavasa Gabiach and lo ratzu, lo vachlotz v'lo liyabim. V'amai chozun eitzel gadol. So we'll say, if that's the case, and none of the, so we'll say, the Gemara says, the case of the Mishnah is, you go to the older brother. So the brother, yibum or chalitza. The older brother says, pass. Right? That's Shimon. We go to Levi. We go to Yehuda. Everybody says the same thing. Then what does the Mishnah say? We go back to Shimon. I will say, so why do we go back to Shimon? Lemichpiyeh. We go back to Shimon because we force him. Shimon, you must now do something. You have to do either yibum or chalitza. To which the Gemara says, lichpiyeh lidido. So why don't we go ahead and force one of the other brothers? Why do we have to go back and force Shimon? Kevan de mitzvah alei didei ramya. Sorry. Kevan de mitzvah alei didei ramya lididei kaifinon. Rabbi said, because since the primary mitzvah of yibum / chalitza rests with the oldest brother, what we do is, we'll wait. If the oldest brother doesn't want to do anything, fine, we'll wait to see if any of the other brothers want to act. But if none of the other brothers want to act, then ultimately the responsibility comes back to the oldest brother, and we force him to take decisive action in one direction or another. To which the Gemara says, Tanan, so we'll say, so we still have this machlokes. At the end of the day, what's more preferable? Yibum with a younger brother or chalitza with an older brother? To which the Gemara says, let's see. Tanan, ultimately, we go ahead, let's say the brothers said, let's wait for Yehuda until he gets older, right? He's the youngest of the brothers, right? So they say, let's wait for him until he gets older. He'll do yibum, right? So what's the halacha? In shomin lo. We don't listen to the brothers, rather we force decisive action now. To which Gemara says, V'i bias katan adifa, amai in shomin lo, nintar dilma gadol miyabim. but I don't understand. If Yibum with the younger brother is preferable to Chalitza with an older brother, then what? Then why not go ahead and just wait? Shouldn't you just wait? Wait, and halacha l'maisa, let the younger brother get older, and he could perform Yibum. To which the Gemara says, same idea, but they will say, but the other case, let's say they say, let's wait for the older brother until he comes back from overseas. We don't listen. Amai, nintar dilma asi v'chalitz. Why don't we wait for him? After all, again, let's wait for him, and what? Maybe he'll do chalitza. To which the Gemara says, Ella kol shahuye mitzvah lo mishahinon. They will say, what a profound yesod. When it comes to the performance of a mitzvah, we do not wait. We do not delay. Rabbi say, I just want to point out over here, what the Mishnah is highlighting is that halacha l'maisa, Yibam or Chalitza has to get done. Rabbi say, by the way, it's also out of deference for this woman. In other words, you cannot leave her in limbo, right? She has a right. She has a right to know either there's going to be Yibam, there's going to be Chalitza, but there's absolutely no reason to string her along. So the Gemara is first off from an interpersonal perspective, and I will say also from a halachic perspective, we do not delay in the performance of mitzvahs. So I will say, what a profound yesod in life also. Shahuye mitzvah lo mishnah. Say, when something in life needs to get done, get it done. Do not delay. Do not. I will say, how often in life do we just kick the can down the road, right? And we kick the can down the road. And I will say, it's interesting. When someone kicks the can down the road, rarely do we ever say, oh, I'm just punting, I'm just delaying, right? What do we often say? I'm waiting for the gadol to come back from Medinas Hayam, right? I'm waiting for the katan to grow up. In other words, there's always a good svara to punt, right? There's always a good svara to keep the can down the road. The Gemara says, don't delay. Don't be one of those people who always has an excuse not to act. Don't be one of those people who always has an excuse to delay, to tarry, right? Shehuye mitzvah lo mishahinon. At the end of the day, if something needs to get done, get it done and get it done now. And I will say again, herein lies the distinction between chametz and matzah. Right? What's the distinction between chametz and matzah? I'll say only one thing. It's the same ingredients between chametz and matzah. The only distinction is time. Time. So I will say again, this I just want to point out, if you want to understand the entire hashkaf of the Yom Tov Pesach, is this line. Shahuye mitzvah lo mishahinan. Get done what you have to do in life. Don't delay. Don't tarry. Live a life of matzah. This is what the Chacham says. The Chacham says, tonight, we're going to read this. Chacham mahu omer, what does the Chacham say in the Haggadah? Ma'edos, va'chukim, va'mishpatim. What are all these mitzvahs? The great tzaddik Rabbi Yitzchak Berdichev says, do you know what the Chacham is asking? Chacham is saying, Tate, Father, all you need in Yiddishkeit is one mitzvah. What's the one mitzvah? Matzah. If you have matzah, you don't need anything else. Because what does matzah teach us? Shahuye mitzvah lo mishahina. Don't delay. Act now. Mitzvah bal yadecha tach mitzena. Opportunity presents itself. Grab it. Take it. Run with it. If you have that hashkafa in life, then you take advantage of your opportunities as they present themselves, then what other mitzvah do you need? What other hashkafa do you need? If you believe that matzah also represents the hashkachas Hashem. We left Mitzrayim in such haste because Chagashim Baruch Hu told us to go and we followed. Chagashim Baruch Hu runs the world. That's number one. Follow him wherever he goes. And number two, don't delay. The opportunities that come up in life, seize them. So the Chacham says to his father, we're going to hear the Chacham say tonight, Tata, why do I need everything else? Why do I need all the other mitzvahs? All I need is matzah. All I need is matzah in life. Because shahuye mitzvah lo mishayina. Tzaref Pesach, I didn't make this cycle, right? I just go ahead and teach the Gemara. I will say, isn't this absolutely incredible? Isn't this incredible? Erev Pesach, in a 7.5 year cycle. By the way, we're not finished. I will say, so it says the Gemara, what do you see from the Gemara? Halach l'maisa, we don't delay, but rather, again, we force the brothers to take action now. So the Gemara says, I'm a base. It's time. Shabbos says, I just want to point out, we still haven't answered our question, which is at the end of the day, which is more preferable? Right? Yibum with a younger brother or Chalitza with an older brother. All we've established, I will say, is that what? We're not going to delay. Right? We're definitely not going to tarry. That's for sure. So I will say ultimately, again, an alternate version of this, that everyone agrees that if there's an opportunity for yibum with one of the brothers, even if it's the youngest brother, that of course is preferable. Right? If one of the brothers is willing to perform yibum, then halacha l'maisa will always take that option. Ki pligi. So I will say, interestingly enough, where does the machlokes come up? Bechalitzas katan, with chalitza of a younger brother. Listen to this. V'hachi yitmar. This is what it means to say. Chalitzas katan v'chalitzas gadol. So I'll say, here's an interesting discussion. If there's a choice between a chalitza of a younger brother and chalitza of an older brother. So we'll say, isn't this interesting? In other words, let's say you have two brothers, ultimately again, who are willing to go ahead and perform chalitza. So who should do it? So the Gemara says, so pligi Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. It's machlokes. Chad amar chalitzas gadol adifa. One says chalitza of the older brother is adif. The chad amar ki haddadininu. And the other opinion says that halacha l'maisa, they're the same. They're the same. The equivalent chalitza is chalitza is chalitza. Makes absolutely no difference who is performing it. So man amar chalitzas gadol adifa. The opinion that says that chalitzas gadol is better. Daha mitzvah begadol. So we'll say because again halacha l'maisa, the primary mitzvah of yibum rests with the older brother. The idach, the other opinion will say, ki aminan mitzvah begadol le'inyan yibum. When do we say that halacha l'maisa, the older brother has a greater obligation? That's what the mitzvah of yibum. Aval le'inyan chalitza k'hadadininu. But I will say ultimately again when it comes to chalitza, they're the same. So I will say, I just want to point out this is now a new layer of tensions, just to keep in mind what we have going on over here. So first of all, the principle that what's the principle that everyone agrees with? Who do we start with when it comes to the mitzvah of yibum? Who do we start with? The gadol, the oldest surviving brother. So we'll say that's uncontested. Everyone agrees, right? So that's piece one. Piece two, then is we know that if the older brother doesn't want to act, what do? Go down the list. No one wants to act, what do? Go back to the brother. Oldest brother. Then we'll say, what else don't we do? If they say, wait for this one, wait for that one, do we wait? We wait for no one, right? But rather, again, we will force the oldest surviving brother to take action. Why? Shahuye mitzvah lo mishahina. Because we don't delay their performance of this mitzvah, or for that matter, any mitzvah. Then we'll say, here's the machlokes. We have multiple brothers who are willing to take different actions, right? Different actions. So, in category number one, I have an older brother who's willing to do yibum, a younger brother who's willing to do chalitza, right? In case number two, we have not resolved that yet. In case number two, I have two brothers willing to do chalitza, oldest brother and younger brother. So I will say, in case number one, the sheileimah is, on one hand, I have mitzvah begadol, but the gadol only wants to do chalitza. But yet, we normally assume that yibum is preferred, but that's only coming from the younger brother. So how do I balance all of that? In case number two, all I have is chalitza on the table, when the only option is chalitza. Does it matter who's doing it? So those are the two things in play over here. So it says the Gemara. So the Gemara says, good. So when we go back for the answer, Chadamar chalitzas gadol adifa, the Chadamar ki hadadinenu. So we'll say it's machlokes. One opinion says that no, chalitza of an older brother is still preferable, and the other opinion says no, chalitza. Once chalitza is being the only time that the older brother has preference, or both sides, is where? By yibum. But once chalitza is going to be done, it doesn't matter who's doing chalitza. Says the Ramban Damar chalitzas gadol adifa. The opinion that says that chalitza of an older brother is preferable. Doha mitzvah begadol. Because at the end of the day, the Mishnah says mitzvah begadol. That's still at the end of the day, the mitzvah is for the oldest brother to take action. Whether that is going to be yibum or chalitza. To which the Gemara says the idach, the other opinion will say, ki aminan mitzvah begadol. When we say ultimately again that the mitzvah is begadol, li'inyan yibum. That's for yibum. Aval li'inyan chalitza ki b'hadadinenu. I will say, but for chalitza, they're absolutely the same. I will say this is the tension. So let's analyze. So Tznan, lo ratzu. If the brothers did not want to act, so let's say we went down the line of the brothers and no one wanted to do anything. Chozrin eitzel gadol. We go back to the oldest brother. So my love lo ratzli yabim ela lachlots. So I'll say, isn't the case where they didn't want? We went down the list. None of the brothers wanted to do yibum, but they are willing to do chalitza. Vikatani chozrin eitzel gadol. And we said that what halacha l'maisa, we go back to the oldest brother. I will say, what do you see from there? Shmamina chalitzas gadol adifa. I will say, you see from there that what halacha l'maisa, chalitza of the older brother is still preferable to chalitza of the younger brother. To which the Gemara says, lo, ratzu lo lachlos v'lo liyabim. No. The case was where the other brothers didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to do yibum or chalitza. Both the same way that by the older brother initially, he did not want to do chalitza or yibum. So we'll say if that's the case, why did we go back to the gadol? Ultimately, again, lemichpie, to force him. We go back to the gadol to force him to take action. Why don't we force the other brothers? At the end of the day, since the halacha is that the mitzvah is with the oldest brother, therefore again we compel him to take action. So Tashma, let's analyze. So remember again we said before that halacha l'mais. Let's say the brothers say, you know what, our oldest brother Shimon is overseas. Let's wait till he gets back and we'll figure out what to do. So what's the halacha b'osai? We don't listen to the brothers. Rather, we force the brothers who are in front of us to take action. And if you hold that chalitza of the oldest brother is preferable, then what? Amai in shulmilo. Why do we not wait for the oldest brother to come back? Nintar dilma asi v'chalitz. Let's wait. Maybe what? Maybe he'll come back and do chalitza. And if that's the case as well, tamech bekatan ad sheyagdil. We also don't wait for the youngest brother to get older to do yibum. Ein shomala amai nintar dilma gadol umiyabim. So I'll say, what do you see from here? Ella, kol shahuye mitzvah lo shahinan. So I will say it's interesting because the Gemara didn't answer its question. Right? The only principle that the Gemara keeps coming back to that we agree on is that we do not delay the mitzvah. We do not delay the mitzvah. We'll say you can't allow the mitzvah to become chametz. Right? We don't delay the mitzvah. So I just want to point out the Gemara has not resolved either of the two questions yet, right? Question number one, at the end of the day, oldest brother wants to do chalitza, youngest brother wants to do yibum. Which one is better? And question number two brothers, right? Oldest brother, youngest brother, both willing to do chalitza. Doesn't matter who does it. So we'll say what the Gemara keeps trying to do is to try to bring a proof from the Mishnah for one of these positions. It turns out you can't really bring a definitive proof from the Mishnah because the Mishnah can be read either way, or you can make opposite inferences, opposing inferences from the Mishnah. The one principle that the Mishnah that everyone agrees with is that what? We're not delaying. So also listen to this. So Tanan Hassan. We'll say here we go. So Tanan Hassan we learned mitzvahs yibum kodemes lemitzvahs chalitza. So we'll say one thing and I'll tell you the Rambam at the end of this year. We have another Mishnah, so listen to this. Mitzvahs yibum kodemes lemitzvahs chalitza. Right? So we'll say the Gemara says, really, the mitzvah of yibum is preferable over chalitza. Ideally, we want yibum. So the Gemara says, that was only true originally when the surviving brother, when he did yibum, had in mind that he was doing yibum for the sake of the mitzvah. However, but now, unfortunately, again, when people do yibum, they often don't have in mind for the mitzvah. So I'll say, what does that mean? We'll see what this means in just a moment. Amru mitzvahs chalitza kodemes lemitzvahs yibum. We'll say now, presently, the way we conduct ourselves is chalitza is preferable over yibum. So we'll say this is a fascinating societal statement. Originally, Chazal said yibum is preferable over chalitza, but that was when people were doing yibum for the right reasons. Now, when we're concerned that people are doing yibum for ulterior motives, then the mitzvah of chalitza is preferable to the mitzvah of yibum. So the Gemara Rav says, in Kovin, we don't go ahead and force the yavam to do chalitza. Rather, if the yavam wants to do chalitza, he can do chalitza. But if he wants to do yibum, ultimately, again, we'll let him do yibum as well. Kiyasu lekanei d'Rav, and they came before Rav. Amar lehu, ibayis chalutz, ibayis yabim. When the yavam used to come before Rav, a yibum case to come before Rav, Rav would say, listen, if you want to do chalitza, do chalitza. If you want to do yibum, do whatever you want. B'didach tala rachmana. The Torah puts the decision in your hands. V'im lo yachpo sa'ish haim chavetz, ibay chalitz, ibay yabim. Pasuk says, Rosa, even the lashon of the pasuk is, im lo yachpo sa'ish. If the man does not want to take this woman in yibum, then Allah chalamayse, he can do chalitza. The idea being that the decision of chalitza or yibum is totally in the hands of the yavam. Va'af Rabbi Yehuda savar in kofin. Rabbi Yehuda also went ahead and said, we don't force a man to do chalitza. Both say, now listen to this. Where do we see this from? This is fascinating. Mid iskin Rabbi Yehuda begita de chalitza. Now both say, here's what's interesting. They used to give what's called a get chalitza. Essentially, a get chalitza is a document which records the chalitza process. So a woman should have a document that goes ahead and shows that she went ahead and did chalitza. So we'll say, here's the text from Rabbi Yehuda's Gita de Chalitza. Listen to this. Eich, plonis bas ploni, akravas yas ploni yevama kadamna lebeidina. Right? So-and-so, this is the widow. Right? Widow, the daughter of so-and-so, brought her brother-in-law, the Yavam, right, in front of us to Beis Din. Listen to this. V'ishtamudinhu da'chu de misna me'abanenu. And we'll see ashtimudinhu means we recognize. We'll see what that means in just a moment. We recognized that so-and-so is the brother of the deceased. V'amrilei, we said to him, eat savis liyabim yabim. So we, the Beis Din, said to the surviving brother, if you want to do yibum, do yibum. V'ilo, and if you don't want to do yibum, itla le raglach. Extend, itla le raglech diyamina. Go ahead and extend your right foot. V'itla le raglech diyamina. And he extended his right foot. V'sharas sinei ma'al raglohi. And she took off his shoe from on his foot. V'yarkas ba'anpohi. Roka de mischazia lebeidina al aro, and she spit in a way that the spit could be seen on the ground in front of the base. And I'll say again, we'll get into this. It's interesting. We have not really touched at all the chalitza process, so we'll talk about what the chalitza process is. I will say, why does the Gemara bring this down? Because what happens over here? And Rabbi Yehuda said in this get the chalitza, it records that when the Yavam came before us, what did we tell the Yavam? What did the Beis Din tell the Yavam? Either do yibum or chalitza, which indicates to us that what? That Allah Lamaisa, he has that option. So also I just point out something very interesting, that halacha lemaisa, you see this tension. Now again, we've already seen this tension before, about presently, do we go ahead and put yibum out there as an option, or do we just go ahead and tell the yavam do chalitza? What does it depend on? It seems to depend on whether or not purity of intention is required for yibum. If you hold that purity of intention is required for yibum, then contemporarily, apparently once upon a time people were able to have purity of intention. Today, we don't assume it, and therefore Allah will tell the yavam to do chalitza. But if you hold that yibum does not require purity of intention, then even contemporarily we could allow for yibum. So the Gemara goes weiter. So the Gemara says, Rav Chia bar Avia Misayim ba Mishmeit Rav Yehuda Vakrinu Mai Dekasa B'Seifa Oraisa de Moshe. So I'll say again, Rav Chia bar Avia said in the name of Rav Yehuda that they would also say Vakrinu. We read before him that which is written in the Torah, in the Torah of Moshe. That they would read him. They would read the Yavam, the Parsha of Chalitza. Good. The Gemara says, Ashtemudinhu pligi barav achav ravina. What does it mean? The document said we recognized that this man who's showing up in front of us is the brother of the deceased. What does that mean? So pligi barav achav ravina. Chadamar be'edim v'chadamar afilu karav afilu isha. So I will say, this is very interesting. We recognize. What does it mean? We recognized him. It's machlokes. One opinion said you need eidos. You need witnesses to come to Beis Din to testify that Shimon is the brother of the now deceased Ruvain. The other opinion says, no, you don't need eidos. You just need someone to certify it. But the someone could be a woman, the someone could be a solitary witness, the someone could even be a relative, right? In other words, you just need someone to show up at Beis Din and say, yes, Shimon is the brother of Ruvain, but Allah Alamaisi, you don't need formal testimony. We'll say, how do we pass it? Giluye milsa ba'almahu fafilu karav afilu isha. We'll say and the Gemara says it's not real testimony. It's what we call giluye milsa. Giluye milsa also means essentially just like a certification. And the certification doesn't require real edus. You just need someone. So it could be a woman, it could be a lone witness, it could be a relative, it could be anyone, just to come to Beis Din and certify that indeed Shimon is Ruvain's brother. Both say, how do we pass in the other two cases? So I'll just point this out. So the Rambam Paskins both say that if there is a choice, ultimately, again, between chalitza of the oldest brother, yibum of the youngest brother, we go with yibum of the youngest brother. Yibum is always preferable. And I will say, whether or not we do yibum contemporarily, we'll get into that. But Lemaisa, for that shayla, the Rambam paskins, if Shimon, the oldest brother, is willing to do yibum, is willing to do chalitza, Yehuda, the youngest brother, is willing to do yibum, we give the right to Yehuda to yibum, because yibum is always preferable. What happens if, two brothers, Shimon, oldest brother, Yehuda, youngest brother, both willing to do chalitza, doesn't matter, if it doesn't matter, and the answer is yes, we prefer the oldest brother to do chalitza to the youngest brother. Say, Rabbi say, yibum is always preferable over chalitza, no matter which brother is willing to do it. And if two brothers are willing to do chalitza, oldest and youngest, we give the chalitza right to the oldest brother over the youngest. Incredible. And Rabbi say, of course, again, we also know we paskin shahuye mitzvah lo mishahinan. We do not wait. We do not delay. We do not delay. We do not kick the can down the road. We don't wait for anyone to come back from overseas. We don't wait for anyone to grow up. Halacha lamaisa, yibum or chalitza are performed with the pool of people who are in front of us presently. Incredible. Both says go a little bit weiter. But l'shem mitzvah. So both says, remember again, so now we're quoting the Bryce we just said before. Originally, when they used to perform yibum, there was purity of intent. Purity of intent. People would perform yibum for the right reasons, for the sake of a mitzvah. So the Gemara says, in that case, mitzvah sibum kodemas lechalitza. The mitzvah is chalitza. So we'll say, when there was purity of intent, everyone agreed that what? Yibum is preferable to chalitza. The aksha shem is kavan shem mitzvah. But now that unfortunately people don't have the right kavanah, amru mitzvah chalitza kodemas lemitzvah yibum. So we'll say contemporarily, we say that what? That chalitza is preferable to yibum. Right? Chalitza is preferable to yibum. Why? Because halacha l'maisa there's that lack of purity of intent. Amar Rabbi Baruch Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Chazru lomar mitzvah sibum kodemes l'mitzvah chalitza. I will say a fascinating turn of events, right? But now contemporarily, now in our time, we've gone back to saying that yibum is preferable over chalitza. Wow! Says the Gemara Rabbi Yitzchak Achshurei Dari. Is that because we're such tzaddikim? What happened over here? Rabbi say, right, think about the history of this. Originally, people did yibum for the right reasons. Salach l'maisap, yibum was preferable over chalitza. Then apparently, again, the generation descended a little bit, and halacha l'maisa. We assume the purity of intent did not exist, and therefore halacha l'maisa, chalitza was preferable. Now the Gemara comes along and says that now contemporarily yibum is preferable. So what happened? People became tzaddikim. Achshurei Dari. Rashi says bitmiya v'chines kashu adoros. Are we better now than previous generations? So let's listen to this. Meikara savi leka'abashal ulubasof savi leka'rabanan. No. But you know what happened? What happened is we switched opinions. We switched opinions. About in the beginning we held like Abashal, and now we hold like Rabbanan. How so? The Sanya Abashal Omer Hakonis esivim to l'shem noi l'shem ishos l'shem davar acher. But Abashal says if the Yavam does Yibum, and the reason he's doing Yibum is why? Because he finds the Yevama attractive. She's very beautiful. Or ultimately, again, because, hey, he's single anyway, so why not? This is easy, right? There's a shidduch crisis, so why not just go, this woman is right in front of me anyway, right? Or l'shem davar acher, or for any other reason. We'll say any other reason means she has money, she has nice midos, she's a good conversationalist, whatever it is. The point over here is, he's marrying her, ultimately, again, not just simply to perform the mitzvah, but ultimately, again, some additional ulterior motive. Kilu pogea be'erva. So Abishal says, I think that's as if he's having relations with his brother's wife, and it's an erva. The karov ani be'enai lios havlad mamzer. Wow. And because ultimately, again, Abishal would treat this case like an erva, I think the offspring is like a mamzer. Now he doesn't say it's like a mamzer. He says karov enai. Right? He says I'm almost close. I'm close to ultimately again declaring the offspring here a mamzer. A mamzer. So again, Abishal is of the opinion that Yibum only works if there is absolute unequivocal purity of intent. Which means what? That halacha l'maisa, the only reason he's doing Yibum is why? For the mitzvah. Any other ulterior motive, by definition, fundamentally undermines what is going on here. And the Moshe makes it like an erva situation. The say, the pasuk just says, do yibum. Right? The pasuk doesn't make any mention of purity of intent. All it says is do yibum. So therefore, all you have to do is do yibum. There's no purity of intent that's needed. So Mantan, so therefore again, the Gemara is suggesting over here, originally we had like Abishal. And then what happened? Somehow, over time, we switched to the opinion of the Rabbanon, and therefore, again, even contemporarily, we could do Yibum, because Yibum doesn't require that purity of intent. So, man tana lahadatan Rabbanon, Yevamo yavala mitzvah, shebetchila haisala bichlal heter. So, let's listen to this. Pasuk says, the Yavam will do Yibum. Now, listen to this. It will say, shebetchila says, in the beginning, haisala bichlal heter. Originally, so we'll call her Rachel, remember again, Reuven's wife, was mutter to Shimon. I will say, when was Rachel mutter to Shimon? Before she married Reuven. Right, originally she was mutter, then she was muteris. What happens? Nesra, then she became asura. When did she become asura? When she married Reuven. Then she became Eshazach. Chazra v'hutra, then she becomes mutter again. When does she become mutter again? When Reuven dies. So Yachol Tachsra Le'atera Rishon. First part I will say, you might have thought, therefore she returns back to original heter. In other words, that you can marry her, no matter, do Yibum, no matter what your intentions. Talmud Lomar, Yevamo Yava Aleha Mitzvah. Yevamo Yava Aleha. There will say, the pasuk says, ultimately again, Yevamo Yava Aleha. So Mitzvah, Mantana. Ultimately, I will say, who says that you have to have in mind only for the mitzvah? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abdimi Abashalhi. This is what it means. I say Abashal Vachi Kamar Yevama Yava Aleha. So the pasuk says the Yavam will do Yibum. Mitzvah Shebetchila. So we'll say Abashal holds that the only way Yevama Yava Aleha, the only way for the Yavam to do Yibum is how? Is if he has explicit intent for the mitzvah. If he doesn't have intent for the mitzvah, then what Rabbi say? Then what? According to Abashal, it's aser. It's aser. It's pogeh be'eshes ach. Karov Havlad Lios Mamzer. He says Shebetchila Haisalav Bichlal Heter. Originally Rachel was mutter to Shimon. When was she mutter to Shimon? When? Before she married Reuven. The Gemara says Ratzal Shem Nai Kansa, Ratzal Shem Ishas Kansa. So I'll say again, and when she was muteres to Shimon, he can marry her for whatever reason. You can marry a woman for whatever reason you want. For her good looks, for her money, for whatever reason, for her midos, you can marry for whatever purpose you want. However, now once Rachel marries Reuven, so Kansa Nesra. So ultimately she becomes Asura, Zeshasach, brother's wife. Chazra v'hutra. Now Reuven dies. She once again becomes permitted, right, through the mechanism of Yibum. Yachol Tachsra L'Hatera Harishon. You might have thought that she returns to her original state of permissibility. I will say, now remember again, in her original state of permissibility, right, you're permitted, right, Shimon will be permitted to marry her for what purpose? For whatever reason he wanted. You might have thought, therefore, in Yibum also, he could do Yibum for whatever reason he wants. Talmud Lomar, Yevama Yavo Aleha L'Mitzvah. Therefore, we'll say the pasuk says, Yevama Yavo Aleha, only for Yibum. Only for mitzvah. So this is the position of Abashal. If you're going to perform Yibum, there must be absolute purity of intent. Only for the mitzvah and for the mitzvah only. And if there's if there's not absolute purity of intent, don't do Yibum, only do Chalitza. Because if you were to do Yibum in that situation, Mamish is like Arayas. Mamish is like Eishes Ach. Incredible. Rava says, Afilatim Rabbanon. Give me the Rabbanon. What's what the Rabbanon mean to say? Yevama Yavaleha. Right, mitzvah. Pasuk said the Yavam should do Yibum. It's a mitzvah. Shebetchila haisa bichlal heter. Originally, ultimately, again, this woman was permitted, right? Bichlal heter, right? Bichlal heter. So remember again, before Rachel marries Reuven, ultimately, again, she's permitted to Shimon. Ratza konsa, ratza ino konsa. See, if he wants to go ahead, if Shimon wants to marry, he can marry. Doesn't want to marry, doesn't have to marry her. Ne'esra, once she marries Reuven. So what happens after that? Ne'esra. She becomes prohibited to Shimon as his brother's wife. Chazra, what happens? Chazra Vutra. Now Reuven dies. Once again, she becomes permitted ultimately to Shimon. So Yachol Tachsra, that Teira Rishon, Ratza Konsa, Ratza Ina Konsa. So the Gemara, and let's say now again, Shimon has it now. Reuven dies. You might have thought she returns back to her permitted status. And if Shimon wants to marry, he can't marry, doesn't want to marry, doesn't have to marry her. Ratza Ina Konsa. What do you mean he doesn't? What do you mean he doesn't have to marry her? Ha'agidaba. Ultimately, again. Remember, Shimon has to do something. Why does Shimon have to do something? Because she's connected to him. How is she connected to him? There's a zeka. She's a yavam. Rather, again, ha'gidaba, b'chdei tipuk. Could she go out with nothing? Ela ema ratza konsa ratza choleitzla. So you might have thought again that Allah Lamaisa, he could do yibum with her, he could do chalitza with her. Talmud Lomar, yevamo yava aleha mitzvah. Therefore, again, the pasuk says the yavam should do yibum. That's the mitzvah. So the fundamental machlokes is like this. According to Abashal, Yevama Yava Aleh mitzvah means that what? The only way to perform yibum is for a mitzvah, absolute purity of intent. If there's a lack of purity of intent, he can't do Yibum. So the Rabbanan say, no, Yevamo Yavala just means that it's preferable to do Yibum over Chalitza, but Allah Lamaisi, even if there's not purity of intent, the mitzvah is still okay. I will say, this is the end of the sugya, but I just want to read you one more line, and this is the last line we're going to do before Yom Tiv. Ema Reisha, Matzos Te'achel B'makom Kadosh. I was saying, I don't even know what to say. 7.5 year cycle. And the last words on the daf on Erev Pesach are Matzos Te'achel B'makom Kadosh. I was saying, sometimes you wake up to Yevamos and you say to yourself, what am I doing here? Right? What? Even I say, I give the share. And sometimes it's like, what am I doing? I was saying, and then sometimes the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives you a little kiss on the head and says, Sheileimah. Thank you so much for waking up early every single morning and learning my Torah. Thank you so much for showing up day in and day out. And I will say, you know what this is? I want to point out, by the way, this pasuk Matzah B'makom Kadosh is not the mitzvah of matzah. It's actually by Karban Mincha. It's Karban Mincha. But I will say, but at the end of the day, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Gut Yantiv to us. This is the Ribono Shalom wishing us a Gut Yantiv. And he's telling us, just understand that tonight, when you sit by your Seder and you eat matzah, matzos te'achal. And I will say, wherever you eat matzah tonight, the Makom Kadosh. Ultimately, again, just know, where's the Makom Kadosh? Rabbi said the Makom Kadosh, the holy place, is wherever we're going to have our Seder. The Makom Kadosh is ultimately the place we're going to consume our matzahs. The Ribono Shalom is wishing us a beautiful and good Yom Tiv, and Rabbi said we should be zocha, that Emirat Hashem to consume our matzahs, b'kedusha b'tara, and Emirat Hashem transfer that sanctity onto the very Makom in which we have our Seder. Rabbi said we'll stop over for today. Shkayach, everyone. All right, chaver on Zoom. Richard, Jerry, Eretz Yisrael contingent. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful Yom Tov. Chag Kasher V'Sameach.